Haunting of Hill House is one of the most acclaimed new shows in contention at the Emmys and other awards this year. I'm Riley Chow of Gold Derby, here with composers Andy Grush and Taylor Newton Stewart, collectively known as the Newton Brothers. So what was the vision for the musical score of this show?
Taylor, you want to go first? Go ahead.
Sure. The musical vision. I would say that it was driven really by the story that Mike Flanagan, the showrunner, came up with. And so we kind of crafted everything as a nice dance. And I would say it was driven mainly by emotion rather than scare for the entire show. And I would say that was the main, that answers the question.
And how much of it is laid out on the page? Like in the script, does it tell you when Mike wants to have music in the scene, or is that more open to interpretation by you guys?
It's a good combination of both, actually. I think that there's a mix of usually in the spotting sessions, it's not written in the script so much where the music will be, but usually we'll sit down in a spotting session with Mike and with the rest of the team and watch each episode and sort of discuss, like, hey, we should have music here, it should kind of do this, we should have music here and it should do this. With this particular show, though, it kind of evolved even further to here's where we should have music, and we'd write music, and then we'd find oh, now that we have music here, maybe it's better if it's dry here and we play music in this next scene. And then even further on the mix stage, then there'd be decisions on the mix stage like, oh, let's take this cue out of here, or, you know, this cue's too aggressive or too melodic. And then we'd kind of bounce back to the studio and write a new cue. So it was a sort of an interesting process on this one, as opposed to just a sort of set parameter idea of where cues should go.
And what about when he is saying something like, you know, take something out here? Do you ever get kind of into a trouble spot where you're setting something up later with cues that ended up being taken out?
It didn't work that way for us. We didn't really run into that problem because we wrote a bunch of pieces of music that kind of represented the family or the house, and it kind of interweaved in and out of that. So it was really supporting just the story rather than something, you know, being taken away. The only thing I would say that I wish, you know, we used a lot of woodwinds and like more traditional stuff for the past stuff, and I was hoping to keep a lot of that in, you know, in the past, but some of it we ended up taking out because it wasn't quite fitting. But yeah, we didn't run into that too much, really.
What would you say is the craziest thing that you tried to put in that you're glad did not make the cut ultimately?
Great question. Taylor, that's a you question. I'm going to throw that at you.
That didn't make the cut that we're glad it didn't make the cut?
Yes. Yeah.
You know, I would say that there was music that I think we liked over certain sections that we thought, you know, hey, this music is great, but it just didn't actually sit in the scene well, because the actor was carrying it so much. You know, a lot of the stuff we did early on, we wrote a lot of music, and then we decided on stage when they were mixing it what would stay and what would go, and that gave us a lot of freedom and choices. And there were some things at times where I liked the music, but we just felt like it was just too much wall-to-wall music. So we wanted it to breathe. We wanted to let it, you know, not take away from the characters in the story. So we used it, you know, sparingly at times and sparse. And there were cues that I definitely loved that got taken out, but I was happy that they did.
There's some shows with very memorable musical scores that have kind of a different theme for every character and maybe like a bunch of themes for each of them. And then there are others that are just kind of, you know, a few cues here and there, very sparse. How do you decide where on the spectrum, like your show will be, how much the score will be an active part of it?
We actually early on had a lot of discussions about who should have a theme, or in this case, what should have a theme. And as we were sort of getting into episodes 1, 2, and 3, we were kind of realizing that it was less about a theme per character and more about an overall theme. We had like a family theme. We had, you know, things are about to get crazy theme. I mean, that wasn't even really a theme, but just, you know, the noises and textures that we sort of came up with. I think we ended up having, there are about 6 sort of like thematic sort of ideas that stayed in the show. And I think we sort of found that the way Haunting of Hill House plays is that it's not just about one character. You sort of think that at first, but as the season goes on, you start to realize it's about sort of the collective, the whole ensemble of everybody, all the characters, and all of the characters at all their different ages. And I think we tried to encapsulate that musically as well by having the music do the same, like not be a singular theme, but maybe be more an encompassing theme.
How dare you? It was about Steve. Steve Frame.
All right. What's the process for creating the main title theme? Because that's something where I would imagine the music might even be a part of it before they come up with any images, or it would at least be involved earlier in the process. Is that the case?
Is it the case that, say the last part you cut out, say it again?
Oh, sorry. I just mean that normally I imagine that, you know, they'll shoot the episode and then you guys will come in kind of post-production. Whereas with a main title theme, it's such an integral part of the title sequence. Do you guys come in any earlier?
We were on, just in general, very early. We were on when it was before they even shot, and we were writing we wrote probably 4 or 5 hours, maybe 6 hours of music before we ever even saw footage. And as far as main titles go, we started on main titles probably right around when we were working on the first episode. And we wrote maybe 7 versions that were inspired by the visuals and what we were seeing, and kind of also the story of the show. Some things we already wrote, and then we kind of gave a bunch of options and choices to the showrunner. And Mike, you know, picked what you hear today, and yeah, that's how that happened.
And do you get any feedback from like even higher up from Netflix?
Sure. Yeah, they definitely chimed in. Yeah, we, you know, that show was more of a process like a film rather than a TV show. And it helped us coming on really early. And when by the time Netflix and Emblem heard a bunch of stuff, it had already gone through a long process of us talking back and forth with Mike, and kind of just deciding what would be what. And so when they heard it, it was very much close to a final finished version.
Did you try to incorporate any kind of weird pieces from the set or the house into the score?
Andy, you can answer that one.
We actually talked about using, early on when Mike started shooting, he texted us that the piano they were using was frighteningly in tune and beautiful. So one of our trips out to Atlanta to visit him and see what was happening, we checked out the piano, and strangely enough, I think Mike now owns that piano. And we had talked about trying to incorporate it into the score. It didn't work out just from a logistics standpoint. It didn't work out, but that was the plan all along. I think that once we got into the process, things were moving really quickly, and we just couldn't sync up time to be able to have Flanagan take his whole house apart for a day for us to come in there with a bunch of microphones and gear and take over his home. But that almost ended up in there. I don't think anything else from the set ended up in there. We did have some production noise that we incorporated into some of the drones that we used. But it ended up being so mangled that it didn't even sort of become like a real, like, oh, that sounds like a boom stand dropping. It was just more noise that Taylor processed 8,000 times through his 12 million modular consoles over there.
Okay, what does that mean? You processed it through your consoles?
Well, I think you know, there's obviously when you score a show or a movie, a lot of times today there's the traditional way, which with an orchestra, and you go in and you record all the players and they perform what you've written. The other element is using synthesizers, and taking a step further is taking sounds produced by the orchestra or by nature or by anything, and then just running it through different ways that can stretch it and can delay it and kind of tune the pitch down, and you get weird artifacts and weird kind of elements to those pieces of snippets that you get, and you can take those and make those into a sound. Like, you know, for instance, we took a waterphone, which doesn't really have, if you strike a waterphone, it doesn't release very long. It sort of dies out. What we did is made it so it kept playing almost like a violin or a string that just keeps bowing and bowing. So that's what he's referring to when he's talking about like processing sound.
Do you have a favorite episode? Oh, sorry.
What's that?
Oh, sorry. Do you guys have a favorite episode that you submitted for Emmy consideration?
We have. It was real tough. 109 is what has been submitted, and episode 109 has so many things going on. A lot of things are sort of coming together, and you've kind of, as a viewer, you kind of recognize like what has happened, and at the end of episode 9, it's just so heavy with this whole teacup scene. It just like, it really, yeah, tea time. It really guts you because it's so heavy to watch, but then strangely beautiful too when you sort of, not beautiful, there's nothing beautiful about it, but it's strangely beautiful because of like why all of these things are happening. And within that whole episode, there's such an arc of, you know, you start off episode 1 thinking that like Luke is has a drug problem, and you see this family that's kind of broken, and you're not really sure why, and you have certain judgments that we all make, like that we make in life, just without even trying to be judgmental. And by the time you get to episode 9, you're realizing that everyone is, that, you know, we're all flawed, and we all have things, we all have ghosts and things that we're dealing with in our lives that affect our lives. And that really plays out in episode 9. And musically, all of the themes are in episode 9, and that wasn't even by design. We kind of, like, as Taylor and I were sort of wrapping episode 9, I remember looking back at the cue sheet, and we were like, oh wow, like this episode encompasses all of the themes, and all of those themes there are new iterations of the themes. Like we never just copy pasted a theme between episodes, because we never wanted to just be rehashing the same, you know, even if it was the same theme. We felt like every single instance of each cue needed to have its own signature to each episode. And episode 9 they were all special episodes, but episode 9 was really special for us musically.
Nice. And where are you on season 2? Will you two be returning to score that one?
That is a great question. We you know, they're writing right now. They're writing the second episode, second season, sorry. And as far as us doing it, you know, we've had some conversations, you know, verbally about coming back, but we haven't officially signed on, and we don't know any more than you guys know as far as the story is concerned. You know, there's definitely excitement going on, but that's what we know right now.
All right. What about in the show? How do we differentiate you two? If we hear, you know, a certain cue, is that more Andy or more Taylor?
Any of the piano that's better played, that's probably.
That's not true.
I'm just kidding. Yeah, I think you know, early on, you know, we could maybe tell a little bit, but then by the time the show was over with, I don't think so. You know, I think we've been doing this now for wow, over 10 years. So our cues kind of bleed together, and we use the same sounds, the same everything. So it's not like something is going to be different than others. But yeah, I don't know if I have to answer that anymore. What about you?
There was when we were putting the soundtrack together, there was a cue. We were sort of deciding on what cues would be on the soundtrack. And Taylor and I are on the phone, and we're going through cues, and we're just playing through a variety of cues. And I said to him, "Oh man, I really like this. I really like this cue, whatever it was." And Taylor was like, "That's your cue." And I'm like, "Oh." And you start to sort of lose perspective on who is who, because we're both sort of, even early on, even with themes, we're sharing things and riffing off of each other and going back and forth, which makes it fun. I mean, that's how, it's what it was like when we were, 12 years old in a band. It's just like, hey man, like play this lick, and like, oh yeah, you do this. It's fun, it keeps it fun.
And my final question is, when people meet you two, do they ever say that they can, see a resemblance between you?
I've had people say a little bit that, but not too often. No.
We always joke we're the brothers from another mother.
All right, well, thanks very much for taking the time to chat. To our viewers, please subscribe to this channel, and also go to goldderby.com to log your Emmy predictions.
Thanks, Riley.
Thank you so much, Riley.